Slayers are one of the most important parts to Hypixel Skyblock, and being able to kill them quickly and efficiently is essential to leveling up your Slayers as quickly as possible. So, in this video, I'm going to be going through the gear, like the weapons, armor, and pets, and also the strategies that you need to be able to kill them quickly and efficiently. You might be thinking, well, Grunky, you're not early game, so why should I listen to you about an early game Slayer? Well, I was once early game, and also, I've asked the people in my guild to help me out with this video, and I've asked them what gear they did and how they did it, and the kind of stuff that they should know and what you should know about doing these Slayers. I'm also going to be mainly focusing on a tier 4 and tier 5 of each Slayer, because let's be real, the 1, 2 and 3 of Rev, Spider and Sven are all pretty easy, and the tier 4 mainly encompasses most of the abilities of the others anyway. Just quickly before we start, I kindly ask you to just like and subscribe because it really helps out my channel. Also, I'm trying to grow my Discord, and at the moment, when you're watching this, there will be a 50 million coin Juju shortbow that I'll be giving away, so you definitely don't want to miss that because it's got pretty much a max enchants. And with the waffle out the way, let's get on with the video. Revenant Slayer is probably one of the easiest Slayers of them all, because it has a decently low health and the damage is not too great either. For the weapon, I recommend an Aspect of the Dragons. An alternative to using the Aspect of the Dragons is actually the Revenant Falcon, because Revenant Falcon has decent stats, got decent intel, and also deals increased damage to zombies. A healing item might also be useful, so you might want to get a zombie sword or maybe like a wand of mending or something like that. For the pet, you can either go down the route of a damage pet like the uncommon griffin or an epic tiger or rare tiger as well, or you can go for an EHP pet like a blue whale or a baby yeti. It depends on how you survive and if you want more damage or you want more survivability. For the armor, although you can use the Revenant set, and because it provides good defense against zombies and also buffs healing ones, I would still recommend using a strong dragon armor because it just gives good damage and also good EHP, and I just think getting a whole nother set for Revenant is just a bit overkill. The Rev tier 4 doesn't really have too many special abilities. There are only two that you need to watch out for. The first one is after 40 seconds, it gets really mad, and what this means is that it moves around really fast and also does a bit more damage to you. If you kill it in under 40 seconds, then this shouldn't be a problem, but if you take a bit more time, then you might just want to back off and disengage when he does this. The second ability that you need to watch out for is that when you stand in the same place for too long, then the Rev just chucks you out into random space, and this leaves you quite vulnerable, and it just displaces you, which can get really annoying. So just make sure you're just moving around, even if it's just block by block, just the next block. The final thing I want to mention about Rev tier 4 is that you might actually need a god pot for this, because god pots give you so much crit damage, strength, crit chance. They're just really good, and I would highly recommend if you can't do it, then get one. Although at the moment Spider Slayer is not really very useful, with probably the most useful spider drop is the mosquito bow, and that died about 2 years ago, upgrading Spider Slayer is still essential to upgrading your profile and ultimately progressing in the game. For the armor, you can still use a full set of strong dragon armor. However, I would now recommend using a Tarantula helmet because it gives really good damage with the radioactive perk, but most importantly, the spider bulwark is very good because it provides damage against spiders. You can actually also use full Tarantula armor, however I think this just lacks a bit of damage, and the strong dragon armor just really makes up for that, and you can also get the 100 crit damage from the Tarantula helmet. For the weapon, I would recommend again the Aspect of the Dragons. The Aspect of the Dragons is a decent mid-game sword which provides okay damage, and it's ultimately pretty cheap and not bad. Although you can use the spider specific swords like the Recluse Fang or the Scorpion Foil, I just don't think they're very good and they're pretty mid. Overall, I think the Aspect of the Dragons is just better because it's just cheaper and nearly as good. For the pet, I forgot to say this in the zombie part, but you should be using a wolf lair to spawn them, and you have to get a legendary one because there's no point getting epic, it has to be legendary for the combat XP boost. For the boss, you should really just be using any regular damage pet, like a tiger, a griffin, a wither skeleton, anything like that. However, if you need to struggle with EHP, then you can use a baby yeti or a blue whale, perhaps. The Spider Slayer doesn't really have anything techy about it. It's not really hard, you just sit in the corner and then you just move around a couple of spaces to make sure you don't get thrown around, and you just hit the spider. Although it does reduce your healing, it's not really that big of a deal, and there's actually, the Spider Slayer doesn't really have any special abilities, so you should be fine. Moving on to Sven Slayer. Sven Slayer is actually somewhat quite tricky because it spawns the pups and it also does true damage instead of just doing normal damage. For the weapon, I would recommend using an Aspect of the Dragons. However, if you have a Mastiff set, which I'll also be explaining later, then you should consider using the Shaman Sword or even the Pooch Sword if you have it. You should only be using the Pooch Sword if you're using the Mastiff set because the Pooch Sword goes really well with the Mastiff set bonus. For the armor, you have two options. Either you can just go with a normal damage set like Strong Dragon Armor or just any other mid-game progression set like Shadow Assassin is even better if you have it. Alternatively, you can also use a Mastiff set, and Mastiff is really good because it, as I said at the beginning, Wolf only does true damage and Mastiff has base 500 HP, which means yeah, it's a little bit tanky. The Mastiff combined with the ability of the Pooch Sword means that you're essentially unkillable to walls and it's pretty hard to die when you're a Mastiff. For the pet, I would recommend using the Wolf pet. The Wolf pet is pretty much better than all of the other damage pets or EHP pets because you take 30% less damage from wolves, which is really good. On top of this, the crit damage you get from every nearby wolf is also good because it stacks really well with the Mastiff set and the Pooch Sword, and also the final perk with the legendary boosting the combat XP is useful for all slayers when you're grinding them. And lastly, most importantly, we have the Revenant T5. Unlike the other slayers, the Rev T5 is actually quite difficult, and if you don't have good enough gear, talismans or skills, then I can completely understand why it would be a challenge for you. For the armor, this may or may not be a bit overkill depending on your skills and talismans, but I recommend you should get 3-Force Necron. Necron is really good for damage, and it also provides good EHP. The helmet you can change a bit, and you could use a Tarantula helmet. However, I really like using the Reaper Mask. The Reaper Mask gives good EHP and also it gives you double healing, so you'll be able to survive a lot easier in the boss, and you can maybe swap out an EHP pet for a damage pet, which will make you kill them quicker. However, I have seen people do this in Shadow Assassin and the God Pot as well, so just do what works for you, and if you can do it in Shadow Assassin, then just do that. Some people recommend using the Reaper armor, but personally I just think it's a bit overrated because it's quite expensive and I don't think it's necessary getting a whole nother set to do a Slayer which you can just do Necron in. For the weapon, you really have two choices. Either you can go with a Reaper Falcon or an Axe of the Shredded if you have it, but I don't think you probably have it at this point. Or the other option is using something like a Giant Sword, or Livid Dagger might work as well. However, the Livid is not as good, and I think using a Reaper Falcon would probably be the better option. This is because the Reaper Falcon gives decently good base stats with good intelligence as well, which is good for mana, and also it deals a lot more damage to zombies, and you take less damage from zombies as well, and you heal 10 hearts per hit. So it just means that you get a lot more survivability against zombies as well as doing more damage to it. For the pet, I would use a legendary wolf because of the combat XP bonus, and it essentially just lets you spawn the boss 30% faster, which is always good for more efficient bosses. However, for the boss fight, you might struggle with a bit of EHP, so if you have Necron, I would recommend that you use a Baby Yeti. However, if you get to the stage where you're actually pretty comfortably surviving and you're healing a lot to make up for the lack of EHP, then you can actually consider using a damage pet like a Griffin or River Skeleton, because this will make your bosses go quicker. And finally, for the boss fight, there are a couple of things I'd like to mention. Firstly, the boss throws up TNT up all the time, so you just need to dodge that. So the way you do it is you just shift and hit the boss whilst just moving backwards, so then the TNT will just not land on you, and the TNT will always land on where you're standing at the moment it's thrown. So if you get hit the TNT on dead on, then you probably will die, so you need to do everything you can to dodge it. The second ability is where it stands in the middle and the ground starts turning bedrock around him. This is a sign that you need to get out the way. So what you can do is you can hit him for a bit, but then you need to get out after about 2 seconds, because the ground will just strike with lightning, and then if you're caught in that, you will almost instantly die. So you just want to make sure you don't get out of that. Luckily, you get about 5 seconds notice, so there's plenty of time to just move out the way. Another thing I think is worth noting is that there is a glitch, where if you stand in front of iron bars, the block sort of counts as a half block, but then the TNT is completely negated, and the boss actually doesn't throw up TNT. This is massive because it just means that you can just sit in the same place and move from block to block so you don't get thrown about, but you can just hit the boss freely without having to worry about dodging the TNT. In another video of mine, I go into this a bit more deeply. However, I'm just going to put the video of doing it up on screen so I can show you how it works. Overall, you just want to make sure you're keeping your tabs on your health, and make sure to just proc that Wonder Restoration when it's not active, because trust me, it's very important in keeping you alive. As long as you have decent gear and you're watching your health and watching your healing, then to be honest, as long as you're dealing enough damage, you should be fine. And things like a Mana Flux or even an Overflux if you have it, Wonder Restoration, and an Ornate or Florid Zombie Sword helps as well. And with the end of Rev Tier 5, that concludes this guide. If you found it helpful or enjoyed it at all, then please leave a like, and if you're extra cool, then consider subscribing as well. And with that, thank you for watching, and hope you have a good rest of your day.